Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of the Mental Health Podcast. I have Isabel here with me, and I can't wait for you guys to hear what she has to say. Hey, Isabel, how are things with you?
Hello, hello. I am doing great. Doing much better now than I have been in a while. So, it's great to be here.
All right, good to know. Before we get started, I usually ask people to give themselves an elevator pitch of sorts, so that people understand where you're coming from and get your perspective as well. So here you go. The floor is all yours.
Um, I am a computer science college student. I do tech I build products, go to hackathons. In terms of mental health, I have been in treatment since 2018. Have gone through a lot of ups and downs, a lot of misdiagnoses, gone through a lot of medication. And now I have gone with some recent experiences, I've gotten to make mental health a more central part of how I live my life, made it much more of a priority, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of things that are in there that I want to sort of unpack. But let's just get started with this question, right? Like, what does mental health mean to you? And then we can go from there.
Mental health means to me how healthy you are in terms of regulating your emotions, in dealing with stressors, with interpersonal relationships. And what it means to me, like how important it is to me, is vary, I guess, because I grew up in a country and an environment where mental health wasn't seen as a real thing. It wasn't seen as important enough to merit a discussion. So being in a place now, or creating a space now, that makes talking about mental health safe and welcome and encouraged is very important to me.
Yeah, so um, I think we can talk about this for hours, but like I'll just bring it up anyways. But one struggle that I have personally is like growing up in um, I don't know, spaces or atmospheres where mental health isn't prioritized as much. Um, you know, that creates a lot of struggles internally, externally, in terms of your own sort of relationships. So, can you talk a little bit about like when, did you realize that, oh, you know what, I needed some mental health help? And you mentioned 2018 as the, timeline. So, like, what made you wait till 2018 to sort of get help from that standpoint as well? So.
Actually, I want to clarify. I had the symptoms. So I had a depressive episode, basically the equivalent of middle school. I'm
Mm-hmm,
like in the American school system.
mm-hmm,
I was in middle school and I was basically like went manic and then depressed, but no one saw the signs. But
mm-hmm,
I knew something was wrong with me, but no one could like tell me exactly what was wrong. I lashed out. I dropped myself out of middle school.
mm-hmm,
I had and that was what, like, that was a catalyst, like me dropping out to
mm-hmm,
moving to America, since I had nothing left for me there anyway back in my country.
mm-hmm,
Um, so it was like I knew something was wrong from that point when I dropped out.
mm-hmm,
But I didn't get the resources of like, hey, there are doctors specifically for these. There are diagnoses, there are medications, until I
mm-hmm,
moved to America.
mm-hmm,
It wasn't until like I got my own work, I got like my own Medicaid, and
mm-hmm,
like navigated the mental health system,
mm-hmm.
that I was able to look for a clinic that had a psychiatrist and a therapist, and then got that kind of treatment.
Definitely. One thing that I definitely wanted to highlight is, for one, awareness is a big challenge for us. There is the next aspect of access. So, these sort of go hand in hand in, different sort of symptoms and, when it proceeds to the long term diseases almost, right? When it goes undiagnosed from that standpoint. So one thing that I have noticed myself is like there are certain things which people call as red flags when they see in people as they engage in different kind of relationships here. But like, coming from an ecosystem which sort of doesn't believe as much in mental health, can you talk a little bit about like how your sort of own relationships with your own family has sort of evolved, or where were some of your struggles along the way as well? So yeah.
Um, so I definitely found some red flags with like the culture that I was raised in. For example, we are Filipinos are gossipers. We love to gossip.
Right.
Even if it's not our business, we will make it our business. So
Right.
that has instilled in me the thing of like caring about what other people think, of
Mm-hmm.
worrying about others' opinion of me. God forbid auntie from like down the street knows that I haven't graduated after
Right.
7 years. Like it's made it's taken such a toll on my mental health that I was taught to care and to gossip and to like meddle in other people's business.
Mm-hmm.
And I like have tried to make like I mentioned earlier of like trickle down therapy, of like what I learned in therapy I'm trying to bring to my community, to my parents, to my relatives, and like, hey, there is a better way of living than to
Mm-hmm.
waste our energy talking about what auntie down the block is like doing with her life.
Definitely.
So I've been, it's been really gratifying seeing that like, hey, like you know the thing like you can't teach old dogs new tricks. That's definitely not the case with what I'm seeing with my, especially with my mom, of
Mm-hmm.
like she's learning to be more accountable and like not joking that it's my fault when it's actually her, didn't she didn't know a thing, and
Mm-hmm.
like learning to apologize, and like hearing your parents apologize for something that they've never apologized before is so healing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a good experience for me as well.
When you said that out loud, so many sort of thoughts popped into my head in terms of understanding, what are some things that you needed that you didn't get, and what are some things that your parents could have done better but they didn't, and for them to sort of acknowledge that they didn't do better. It's been a whole journey for me, because like, people talk about forgiveness, but understanding what you're forgiving somebody for, understanding why it means so much to be asked for forgiveness or to give away that forgiveness, it has been a whole sort of journey from my standpoint. One thing that sort of comes along with this was the aspect of generational trauma, right? Can you talk a little bit about like what that means to you and how you've seen that sort of evolve as well? So.
Generation sorry, generational trauma, the way that I've seen it is that or actually I the way that I understood generational trauma is through the empathy that I saw of like, hey, I'm going through this inner turmoil of my own stuff from my mom, and then
Mm-hmm.
I could see, hey, she's going through the same stuff I'm going through. Maybe she like, where did she get hers from? And then I'm understanding, hey, that came from grandma. Where did
Mm-hmm.
grandma get it from? So generational trauma is this trickle down effect of issues that our grandparents struggled with became issues that our parents struggled with, that we are now trying to break that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, for me, one of the generational curses that I am trying to break is like expectations. There's this
Mm-hmm.
expectation to succeed, to
Mm-hmm.
be the best at all times, and being like, even if I'm like, for lack of better word, mediocre, like if I'm not being the absolute best at things, but I'm happy with where I'm at, like
Mm-hmm.
hearing that, hey, my mom is okay that I'm taking my time with my graduation,
Mm-hmm.
is healing that generational trauma of always having to do things first, of
Mm-hmm.
always being like the fastest or the best.
Definitely. One thing that I I don't know, I want to repeat it a few million times to people is that dealing with expectation, understanding, what expectation means to you, understanding, how you can sort of go about, making sense of where you are and where you can be, is a conversation that takes years to sort of get past. And like you mentioned that, like, you took a little longer to sort of, get your degree from that standpoint. So I'm trying to understand, like, what was the journey like for you as an individual, right? Like, to sort of come to senses of saying, hey, you know what, it's okay that, it is taking me more time. It's okay that, I am doing the best I can. So can you talk a little bit about that from that standpoint?
I'd love to, because this is something that I either am currently or have struggled with a lot. Like, this is like the record scratch of the entire flow for me of like, so one of the things that I'm realizing is like, of all the lies we tell, the hardest ones to realize that they're a lie are the ones we tell ourselves. And the lie
Mhm.
that I've been telling myself is that in order for me to be worthy of love, I have to be perfect. I have
Mhm.
to be excellent. I have to be like this certain level of a person.
Mhm.
So I forgot where I was going with that, but that, like, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question that I was trying to answer?
So basically, how do you sort of make sense of where you are at, when, whatever goal that you've set takes longer to get to, as
Oh,
in, yes. So.
yeah, so recognizing the lie that, like, yes, I am still worthy of love even if I'm taking longer. Yes, like, I am still as worthy of a person that I am even if I'm taking not the same trajectory or not the same pace as everyone else. And one thing that has been helpful for me is like realizing that we're all it regardless of what pace it is, we're all on different journeys, we're all on different paths. So saying that you're behind someone is based on the assumption that you're walking the same path, but you're not. They're taking a different winding road than you are that you don't realize. So comparing yourself to other people is, I know that people say like comparison is the thief of joy. Once I started like not worrying, okay, I have peers that have already graduated. Like the classmates that I had before I immigrated are doctors now. Like they just finished medical school. So if I fell into the pitfall of like comparing myself to them, I would definitely feel super bad about myself. But now that I'm realizing that, hey, I'm not a doctor, but I would make a dang good engineer one of these days. It makes me feel a little better that, hey, my path is different. So my end goal is going to look different as well.
Definitely. And this is something that is coming up and is going to sort of drive, I feel like, the future generations as well, wherein like education as a system is changing, career as a system is changing, trajectory, like you mentioned, even assuming, there were certain norms that were defined, life had certain, obstacles along the way. So can you talk a little bit from that standpoint as well, wherein like, how do you sort of, compartmentalize it all, or like, how do you sort of take it all in, and say, hey, you know what, I'm not losing, something, or I'm not sort of getting overwhelmed, and this is okay, from that standpoint as well. So any thoughts on that as well?
I am definitely like, I'm not going to make the like illusion that I know how to juggle everything. Like I think what it is a juggling act. There's all these different facets. There's all these different like I guess like balls that you have to handle. Like you have work, you have school, you have your family, you have like your career, and all of these things. Like you can only hold on to so many at the same time while the rest are up in the air. So being able to manage that, like, hey, these are how many I have slots for in my brain to focus on at the same time. These are how many I can put in the back burner without like falling off the band, like falling off, was it falling through the cracks? That's what I'm saying. Like self-awareness is really helpful in that you can know how much you can handle, how much, okay, I'm going to need help, or I'm going to be burnt out by the end of the week, maybe I shouldn't take on these many things, or maybe let's reassess the priority levels to see which ones I can't let go of and which ones I can push off for another time.
Definitely. You mentioned a great thing in terms of juggling too many things on your own plate. Sometimes I feel like my struggle is, I don't want to sort of put too many things on my plate, but at the same time, I'm also sort of wondering, am I putting too little things on my plate so that, I have time left over and I don't know what to do with my time. And this has sort of been a balancing act from that standpoint as well. One of especially the Asian culture, the way there is a huge struggle in terms of asking for help. So I just wanted to get your take on like what was your journey and understanding that for one you could ask for help, and for two, how do you sort of go about that process, making that just that little bit easier for other people as well. So.
I think so. I like to go deeper into things like, why don't I like asking for help? Like investigating further what the intention or the motivation is for why I do and don't do things. And
Mm-hmm,
for me, the reason why I didn't like asking for help was because it was admitting that I was not good enough to not need help in the first place. So
mm-hmm,
like addressing that, reconciling that, hey, I am still just as fine of a person, just as worthy of a person, even if I need a little help with this thing. I, I, something that helped me like tangibly was like, okay, I'm not so good at, I don't know, washing the dishes, but
mm-hmm,
I am much, much better at sweeping the floors. So
mm-hmm,
knowing that like there are strengths and weaknesses, there are things that I am much better at
mm-hmm,
that make up for, even if I'm not as good at this other thing, I can ask help for that other thing and then help in the thing that I'm already good at.
mm-hmm,
And like this give and take of, and like this, because like asking for help is admitting as well that we are social creatures. We are, um, we need connection as human beings. So
mm-hmm,
this symbiosis of like, I'm trusting you by
mm-hmm.
asking for your help, and I'm gonna like, I'm gonna reciprocate that by also giving you help.
Definitely. I think we lose track of this fact, wherein like we as a society have evolved for so many generations, and there is a reason why we've survived for this long, because we are a collaborative community, and we've depended on each other for things that we aren't good at. But like from an individual perspective, from a family oriented perspective, we are sort of either given too much expectation, or that there is sometimes there's this sense of ego that you can do everything all the time, and that sort of drives you to places where you say, hey, uh, you know if only I tried just a little bit harder, then I can do everything, and that sometimes leads you into that rabbit hole of sorts as well. uh, you know some of the other struggles have been uh, for me to find right kind of help from the mental health standpoint, right? Can you talk a little bit about your own experience on like how your experience has been from like asking for help to like getting to a place where you say, you know what, all things considered, I am in a better place from where I was before as well. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely been a trial and error. It's been there. There have been hits. There have been misses. There have been. I've had therapists who I could tell were just like not interested in hearing me or like getting to the root of my issues, and we're just like, I don't know, maybe they're for a paycheck.
Mhm,
I had trigger happy and trigger unhappy psychiatrists that were like either really really eager to give me medication and just like up my dosages, that it took me a while to figure out like, why are you keeping upping my doses? I have 4 meds now, they're all like
mhm,
200 milligrams each, and
mhm,
like she still wanted to up my dose. So being like yes, trust your healthcare provider, but also like be inquisitive, be like a healthy level of skeptical that like, hey, um you know yourself best. Like the thing about mental health is there is a level of like trust in the patient that they can explain what they're going through, because it's not like you can see a gash on, like you can see a gash on your leg, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
really like see the problems of, like, let's say PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
um so I think that it definitely took me a while to get used to. For example, um, in therapy sessions, it used to be that I would just like ramble and just like talk about my week, and it would not get anywhere. Like there was a time in the first year or so of my therapy, it was just like go like it wasn't structured. I didn't really know, like it was just a part of my routine.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I could talk about my week.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we would talk about heavier stuff, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like I didn't really feel a direction with it. And
Mm-hmm.
then a couple of therapists after that, maybe like one or two therapists after that, I got a therapist that was very goal oriented. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one green flag for you to look out for in a therapist or in a psychiatrist. Goal oriented. They see where they help you see where you want to end up, and
Mm-hmm.
tangibly look for steps for you to like get there to where you want to be. How do you envision your healthy looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Because like even if we say we're healthy, there it's not going to be like 100%. So like what are your priorities in your recovery, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
um and then so I had like there are some clinics that have like 3-month check-ins of like these are your goals every 3 months. And then there are others, like private practices maybe are a little more fluid with that. It depends on where you end up. I personally really liked the experience of going to a clinic versus like, because that way my psychiatrist and my therapist could talk to each other. So when I told my therapist that my classes were starting soon, my psychiatrist already knew, hey, we're going to have to look out for that. Her stress levels are going to rise. So that communication between my care team, super duper helpful. And that's not something that a lot of people, like a lot of facilities have. Um, Only urban areas, only like if you have like the right kind of insurance. So that's like, if we ever get there, that's actually one of the things I'm trying to solve with the app that I'm building.
Definitely. Thank you for highlighting that, wherein um, there is trial and error to begin with. Understanding if there are certain green flags with the therapist that you're interacting with, learning that just because you've had a conversation with somebody that you have to stick to them, going through that process of navigation with different therapists and seeing their approaches as well, and ultimately sort of defining where you want to be, because like without that clarity, I've seen this happen with a lot of people wherein they say they are in therapy but they're not really getting anywhere. It almost becomes just another mechanism, gating mechanism almost, to say that you have somebody to depend on, and you just go there and you went and you come back and you fall back into the same sort of patterns. So that is something that is very important. The last thing that you mentioned was like, yeah, the communication between the psychiatrist and the therapist, so that way they understand where you are, and they can sort of tag team together to help you better accomplish your goals as well. Now, since you brought it up, what's the app that you're building, and like how can people sort of find more about it as well? So
So the app that I'm building is called Tomo. With my experience from like my own personal lived experience in a psychiatric facility, like inpatient care,
Mhm.
where I had 24 hours. Like someone was always looking after me, always making sure I was taking my meds. Going to outpatient care once I was discharged, where I was mostly like self-directed, like I was on my own. I had to figure it out. I had like a pamphlet at best.
Mhm.
Um, so I wanted to bridge that gap where even if you aren't so severe that you need to go to the hospital, you still need care. So what
Mhm.
about those people who are like moderate to not so severe
Mhm.
mental illness or chronic condition? I want to help them better adhere to and monitor their treatment.
Mhm.
It's still very early. Like I was in the hospital in spring, and I've only had the idea since I got out of there. I am honestly focused right now on market research, like determining what exactly is the problem that folks in outpatient treatment are facing,
Mm-hmm.
before going into like I have a few friends from hackathons because I brought this idea to a hackathon or two,
Mm-hmm.
um, who are developing the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the main thing that we're like in search of right now are folks who can speak about their experience in outpatient care,
Mm-hmm.
and folks who know React Native, because I've been finding that the the gap, like since we're both like working in tech, the gap in like junior to senior is growing. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of either you're super duper experienced or you're super duper junior is what I'm noticing with the new like what do you call that,
Tech
atmosphere
space.
of the.
Sure. I get what you're getting at. And yes, to understand what it takes to build something, especially in the mental health space, this is something that I want to talk about as well. And I'm glad you brought it up, wherein like the way you went about doing this is, pitching your idea to a few hackathons and seeing, how it lands. And do you see interest and, understanding how you can sort of go after people who want to make that impact and build something out, as well as have the skill set. Like you were mentioning, the lack of skill set sort of is a huge obstacle as well to sort of contribute in a good enough manner. That being said, one thing that I ask people is like, how do you sort of manage your own sort of mental health on a regular basis, right? I understand, that there is this aspect of medication, that there is this aspect of therapy, but on a day-to-day basis, I feel like, there are things that, you know, we can be doing to sort of manage our mental health better. So, like, what would your sort of insight be on that for people trying to understand how to handle their mental health better?
Sure, of course. So my thing for me is oh, two things. I got two main things for me. I I'm like a plant. My
Mm-hmm.
mental health will suffer so badly if I don't go outside in a while, but I'm very isolated. Like ever since the pandemic, I work from home, I stay at home most days.
Mm-hmm.
So I can like even if I don't like do anything about it, I can see the difference that it takes on my day to day if I don't go outside versus I do go outside. So getting a lot of sun, even just like
Mm-hmm.
taking a walk, like there was my streak could be better, but there was a time when I would first thing I do in the morning, take a walk. Not first thing, but like very early in the morning, I start my day with a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it would like recharge me, rejuvenate me for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a lot to like get that initial push, that like starting energy.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's one. The other thing is like being aware of what it looks like once I'm deteriorating. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I know that I lose my appetite, for example, if I'm starting to get burnt out, I'll
Mm-hmm.
take a note of, hey, I haven't eaten dinner and I'm still not hungry. It looks like my appetite is a little low. Maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I do need to take a break, even though I'm not feeling as tired. So like listening to your body's cues is
Mm-hmm.
how I would say like the day to day looks like. Sometimes like ways that I think that can get easier is like tracking. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you notice that your sleeping is off, or if you're eating, or irritability, like if the thing that would like piss you off and make you go throw a fit is much smaller now than before, like you could have totally just taken it in stride and been the bigger person and not been petty.
Mm-hmm.
um like keeping like being more aware of your own triggers and of your own like symptoms and etc. Will help you be more prepared for when it does come later down the line, because it's gonna like you are gonna get burnt out again. You are gonna like get depressed or get manic again.
Mm-hmm.
Being more prepared when it does arrive will make you like all set.
Yeah. Um, I just had to reflect on what you said a lot, because I know of a lot of people, like you said, getting that initial boost in the morning is very essential, because like I know people struggle to get out of bed in the morning, because like it just feels like there's an additional weight on you, which is sort of pushing down, saying, hey, you know what, I just don't want to do it. Understanding that, and being more compassionate about it is something that I've been doing that myself as well. The other great thing that you mentioned is like the sense of irritability and noticing your own sort of body cues. Definitely made a lot of sense, because you can notice that in the simplest of things, right? Like when you're driving and you see somebody cut you off, and like you say,
The
oh, you know
road
what, oh
rage.
yeah, and like what are your sort of symptoms? Or when you're working on something and something doesn't work, and like how soon do you get to that stage of saying, hey, you know what, I don't care. Like, this is just not working for me, sort of stage, rather than saying, okay, you know what? I just realized that I just found out one of those ways where this doesn't work. And like, what are some of other possibilities that I can try as well? So, the other thing that I'm sort of trying to bring awareness around is also to be inclusive is, do you have like a personal go-to motto or a statement, or something that sort of inspires you, right? And when you sort of read it, you're like, okay, you know what, now I get some energy from that standpoint. It could be something that you say to yourself, could be in your own local language, and these are some things that I feel like are important, so that more people feel included as part of the conversation as well. So
I the my like thing to motivate me isn't in my own language or anything like special. It's just like I used to say we got this, and I kept like we got this, we got this, we got this when I would like psych myself up, and then I realized, hey, let's try changing that. I got this. I'm not waiting for anyone to save me. It's in my own hands. This is my life. I got this. It's
mhm,
not no like even if I could ask for help, no one else has my back more than I do. So I got
mhm,
this, I think is
mhm.
the closest I have, but it's like a very generic phrase.
No, that's okay. So the thing is, like, there was somebody who had come in, and she said the simplest of things, soy fuerte, and she said that it says you are strong, right? And just repeating that over and over again in that local sort of language, it gives you that sense of confidence, right?
Mhm.
And the thing is, like, that's what I'm trying to sort of communicate to people as well, that you want to come up with those small taglines, or that small dialogues, or whatever that you want to use, that sort of can pick you up when you're feeling that low, or like when you feel like you need some energy and you don't have that energy to sort of go for the whatever next hour or so, right? So that was the main motivation behind that. One last thing that I'll ask for you is like, what are some of the challenges that you've seen, like, along your own sort of mental health journey? I know you're trying to solve one of those problems in terms of seeing how, people can get better assistance, but like, anything of note that comes to mind that you feel like is still a problem, and, that can be addressed but isn't being addressed from that standpoint as well. So.
Um, I think I the first thing that comes to mind, there probably are others, but the first thing that comes to mind is like the lack of research into like more inclusive neurodivergent research. Like have like um you may have noticed there's like an uptick in people talking about ADHD, autism, and just like neurodivergence in general. But
Mhm,
that is because most of the research before this uptick was done on little middle class white boys who had
mhm,
ADHD and autism, and they
mhm,
always presented the exact same way. So
mhm,
because of that, because of research, people didn't know, or people are still struggling to know, what ADHD and autism looks like in women, in
Mm-hmm.
people of color,
Mm-hmm.
in low income families.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think being more like being more I guess the challenge there is keeping a more open mind on what these neurodivergence, these differences can look like in different people. Like
Mm-hmm.
the hyperactive in ADHD doesn't have to mean like always like being a literal ball of energy. It could be me overthinking so hard in my head that no other thoughts can penetrate it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like my own personal experience with that is I started like my first diagnosis was depression, like just
Mm-hmm.
general flavor depression. And then
Mm-hmm.
I went to bipolar 1. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're seeing that, hey, I also have ADHD and autism, which like is that it, or is it both, or is it like none of the above, all of the above, whatever. And I'm starting to like pinpoint now, like, hey, which ones are my mental illness and which ones are my neurodivergence, and just like being able to like figure that out without as much research that's like out there has been
Mm-hmm.
a little challenging.
Definitely. Yeah. I think one thing that I definitely picked up on is the way the labels are created, have been using certain norms which aren't inclusive. And for one, we need to make the labels more inclusive to say, hey, you know what, how do these symptoms manifest in different people? How do we sort of perceive certain audiences based on their behavior, and can we categorize them better? Can we add more labels, or can we sort of build different systems where we can understand how to sort of categorize and help these people in different ways as well. And the other thing that I sort of took away as well is in terms of like the data that people collect, let's be more inclusive. So that once you gather the data, the whatever evidence that you get, and whatever solutions that you propose are inclusive, rather than trying to figure out what went wrong when you don't have all pieces of the puzzle as an input to begin with as well. The conversation was just amazing, and I just wanted people to take away a few things from the conversation. So if you wanted people to take away maybe three things, like what would they be from this conversation? So
We kind of covered a lot. So um one thing that you said that I didn't get to comment on was like you used the word compassion, and it stuck with me so much for like the topic of like generational trauma and like family and like that part of our conversation. Being compassionate and like knowing that, hey, if I'm going through all of this stuff in my own head, and there are 7 billion people out there, there are 7 billion other people going through the exact same, like not exact same, but the same level of like complexity and turmoil and like conflict. So if like treat others the way you would want to be treated is another
yep.
takeaway that I would want to have.
Mm-hmm.
If you want others to be more compassionate to you and your needs, be more compassionate to others and their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And ah uh so another part of like what helps motivate me is Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. One of the things he says is there's nothing wrong with letting the people who love you help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's my third takeaway. Let help in. Let people who love you help you.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that was a great sort of comment to end the conversation. But, I just wanted to sort of reiterate that, right? Because it's a struggle for one to understand you need help, for two to get to a place where you understand where you need help, and finally to sort of be open enough to tell people that, hey, you know what, these are the places where I need help, and can you help me, and asking for help. from that standpoint. So thanks again, Isabel. The conversation has just been beautiful, and my hope is more people find inspiration from your approach, and that they find more compassion, right, in what they're doing as well. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Sanjay.